Hey guys, it's Charlie, and welcome to another episode of Talking to Charlie. If we take a step back and look at our previous episode with my oncologist, Professor George Follows, one subject that got paid mention to on a number of occasions was that of all things diet. So it seemed only right that we did a deeper dive into this very topical subject. I mean, tell me one person who hasn't been on one, for example. But I want to learn more about just the implications of diet and weight loss. I want to know about what we can be doing more of when it comes to our food choices in order to live a more fulfilled and healthier lifestyle. But in particular, those foods that can play a vital role in our lives when it comes to all things cancer and cancer prevention. In particular, building strength and immunity for those undergoing treatment. And ultimately, what we might need to be mindful of when in recovery or remission. So I'm delighted to welcome a leading nutritionist to the show and owner of the hugely successful wellbeing retreat Wildview in Portugal, a Mr. Andrew Finlay. So let's bring him on in. Andrew, hello, mate.
Hey, mate, how's it going? Nice to
It's
see
really
you.
good. How are you getting on?
I'm very well, thanks.
Good, man. I should stop us there straight away because just for the sake or benefit of our listeners, there clearly appears to be some sense of familiarity between us already. We were actually at school together. Rewind, I think it's over 25 years ago now. You were in there, I think it was the year above. We didn't really stay in touch post school, and it wasn't until about 5 years ago where we sort of reconnected, and you were very much in your nutrition sort of guise, if you like. But I do know from the outside looking in, rewind 20 years, and your career path at the time was on a completely different route, if you like. I understand you were a marine biologist out in
That's
the
right.
ocean, diving left, right, and centre. So, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit more about that? In the sense that you were
Absolutely.
going one way,
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
you suddenly found yourself going in a completely different way.
That's right. Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say it's a huge pleasure to be talking to you. And I'm also really proud of what you're doing here. I think it's such an amazing thing to be able to share your experiences with what you've been through. So many
That's
people
really
are going
kind.
to benefit from this. So not necessarily just from what we talk about, but from all the other podcasts that you're doing. So I'm really proud of what you're doing, mate. So
Thank you,
really
mate.
well done.
And that wasn't pre-recorded, was it?
No, it's genuine, heartfelt.
You're a good mate.
Uh,
You're a good mate.
I was in my element. I was living my dream. 10 years doing marine biology all around the world, and it was brilliant. But then society, well, I brainwashed myself into thinking I need to come back to the UK and get a proper job. And that was all the conditioning and all the messaging that I'd been brought up with. You know, must go to university, must get a sort of corporate type job, must get married, must have children, must get the two down, must get in debt, and do all those things that you was perceived to need to do in order to be happy and successful. So I came back to the UK when I was about 30 and got a job doing marine biology but environmental planning of offshore wind farms, which sounds really cool, but basically I was just a cog in a wheel for a
Right.
massive machine in London. And I quickly fell into a bit of a dark place in my early 30s. I'd basically let go of my purpose and my passion and had allowed my programming of my earlier years to take over into
Yeah.
what was perceived to be the ultimate way of gaining success and
Our
happiness.
education, almost.
Well,
Do you know what I
yes,
mean? Yeah.
exactly. And I don't blame our educators, our parents, or anything like that. That was just the
No.
model that we were lived through in the 80s and 90s. You know, you get your A levels, you go to university, you get a job in the big mothership, and then you live for the weekends and the holidays, and that's kind of it, really. And so,
Okay.
yeah, I was really unhappy. You know, I don't mind saying depressed at times. It was really tough. And what made me change was the fact that about 15 years earlier, when I was about 23, 24, so actually no, it was only about 10 or 12 years earlier, I can't really remember. My father had died of colon cancer. So he'd worked his backside off all his life to come out of poverty in Northern Ireland, Belfast, to become a vet, made something of himself. But then, you know, his messaging was that I've got to make as much money as possible and not think about anything else. So
Wow.
he made a reasonable amount of money, deeply unhappy, retired at 52 or something, and then died a year later from colorectal cancer. And
So
back then he
the
knew that.
diagnosis kind of was the shape you needed, as it were, if you like.
Well, it wasn't until 10, 12 years later. So,
Right.
you know, when it happened to my dad, I was like, okay, that's just unlucky. But actually now I know with the education experience I have that it wasn't unlucky. The choices that he made, it weren't his fault. Just that's, you know, you prioritize your finances, you prioritize your career, your family, and all of these things over yourself. And that's basically been the model for a very long time. So I decided, you know what? No, I'm going to start prioritizing myself from now on, what I want. And I also thought that, gosh, if I go the same way as my father at 52, or my grandfather who died at 40, obviously had pretty dirty genes on my father's side. I thought, geez, I might only have a few years left to go. So if I'm going to go soon, I may as well go down happy. So I was like, right, I've got to get out of here and do something.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was. I knew nothing about nutrition.
Wow.
I knew nothing about spirituality or wellness or yoga or anything like that.
Yeah.
I was a normal bloke. I still am a normal bloke, just a bit more enlightened.
So you literally went back to school again, almost like started again.
Yeah, I felt like I had nothing to lose. I realized I was very fortunate in the sense that I had all of the failed relationships and all the things, or however you want to perceive them, I now see as gifts.
Yeah.
Because it allowed me now to just move on without any responsibility or worries. So I had no pets, no children, no wife or anything like that. So it was very easy for me to make the decision, look, I'm not happy, I'm going to change it. And so I had been on a retreat that year when I left my job, and found it to be a really amazing experience, not just because I felt fantastic also, but it was also because I was surrounded by just super nice people that had no baggage associated with the relationship. It was just very much come as you are, be the person you want to be, and just I found it so refreshing to have no personality mask, whether it be my friendship circle, whether it be my parents, my colleagues, my boss. I could just be who I wanted to be, and I just found it so incredibly nourishing. So I've kind of thought to myself, I want a bit more of that. So I started volunteering on retreats, age 36 or whatever it was, basically chopping up carrots and clearing out compost toilets. Can you believe it? In exchange for just spending a bit of free time on these retreats. And I kind of very much see it now as a healing process and sort of reevaluating what was the important priorities in my life. And it was during that time that obviously the retreats had a lot of healthy food. I started to feel fantastic. I stopped feeling below average on a daily basis. And I started feeling like I was 21 again. And I thought, what is this? And suddenly, miraculously, the slow cogs in my brain, the penny dropped. And I was like, aha, whatever you put into your body, the gasoline you put into your engine, or the environment within which you drive your engine, totally dictates how you feel and also your longevity and all that. So that's why I started to change then.
Wow, incredible. And there you are now, leading nutritionist and owner and running a hugely successful wellbeing retreat in Portugal, Wild View.
Yeah, I now run Wild View Retreat in Portugal, which is a business I set up. But to be honest, that was never the dream, and that was never the priority. That was the consequence of a period of desperation where I felt like I needed to get out of my miserable black hole.
Right.
And I prioritized feeling good about myself and surrounding myself with nourishing people, devoid of toxicity, and trying to learn about nutrition so that I hopefully could enjoy my latter half of my life and not go down the same way as my father. So I decided to enroll at the College of Naturopathic Medicine in London, and I did a 3-year nutrition diploma part-time whilst I started to reevaluate really what I wanted to do in my life. And when I was on these retreats, bear in mind it was all free, so I was like living on the floor in a dormitory, chopping up carrots. My mother obviously tearing her hair up, thinking, what's happened to my son? Oh my God, he'd have a good job.
But
I was happy. I was happy. And when you're happy, you attract things into your life. And I started to redevelop my mojo, my purpose, and everything started coming back slowly over time. And I started to notice things with these different retreats that I thought to myself, if I was running this place, I would do it that way, or I'd do it that way. And I would definitely have some educational programs to educate the guests here about how what you put in your mouth absolutely dictates the function of the body and how you're going to live out your days. So that's how it all started.
I think you're almost, that story in itself is an inspiration, particularly for those that almost might be thinking similarly, like shit, what am I doing? Which like, actually, it's never too late. And, you find your purpose and you crack on and here you are. So listen, I could talk to you all day long about, the healing journey. I mean, I think we do spend a lot of time in, when we do get together, but I think, for the benefit of the listeners, the very much the premise of this episode is all things diet and nutrition, which was a topic that came out from my previous episode with my oncologist, Dr. George follows. And actually, I did a bit of digging myself and stumbled across a stat that suggests that a third of all cancers are linked to poor diet choices, which was terrifying. And I think hopefully this is why between you and me, we can start trying to answer some questions. So, diet, I think we've all been on a diet, in its sort of, I guess, waist loss implications. We've also heard from the numerous celebrities, personalities, be it the Atkins, the carnivore, the intermittent fasting, etc. Is that more of just sort of a marketing sort of piece, or because from on the outside looking in, I would think there's clearly got to be a staple diet that will serve a purpose on a day-to-day basis without going to extremities of cutting out that and cutting out this and everything otherwise.
Sure.
So just on a generic basis, are you able to sort of give an indication, what should we be doing more of and less of, just to retain some kind of healthy lifestyle?
I just want to touch on that point about this sort of celebrity diet thing, the fads that come out every 5 years and then get washed away and then it's the next thing. All of those have some credibility, all of them.
Right.
The problem is it really depends on what is your objective. If your objective is to lose weight, then there'll be a certain diet for that. If your objective is to reduce the risk of heart disease, then there'll be a diet potentially for that. If it's to reduce your risk of cancer, or if you're in remission, there's a specific type of diet that would be relevant to that. And so the problem is that when a celebrity or some sort of influencer jumps on the bandwagon because it's been beneficial to them, they get excited about it. They pour all their resources into it. There's also sometimes some sort of economic incentive behind their messaging, so they start creating products associated with their message, and then it becomes this great big juggernaut. And then what you end up, unfortunately, with is a social media circus of conflicting messaging, which just confuses the shit out of people. Excuse my language, and I don't blame them, because we're not educated in nutrition. Well, there's a very few people are, like myself, and so. It's an absolute disgrace, by the way, and I think it's a crime that we, as when we were children, were not educated in the core aspects of nutrition, all the macronutrients, fats, proteins, carbs, micronutrients, all these things. If we had known those things growing up, just like we learned to drill a hole in the wall or tie a shoelace or ride a bike, then we wouldn't be in half the mess that we're in now. But, it's now been made much more complicated because of social media and because it's so easy to access unregulated misinformation out there. And the information is correct, a lot of it, and that's why people are so adamant about it. It's just that it depends on what your goal is, and that's a really important point. So, for example, I used an example of white sourdough bread. People always go, "Oh, it's amazing." Well, it's amazing if you're not overweight and trying to lose weight, and you're just trying to improve your gut health because it has the mother culture and it's fermented food and it's good for that, for example. But if you're somebody who's trying to lose weight and you're, obese, for example, but you think someone's told you that sourdough bread's good for you. Well, yes, it's good for you as a part of a balanced diet, but it's just basically a white refined carb. And if you eat that regularly and consistently, a couple of times a day, then you're going to put weight on. So it really depends on what the objective is, and so. But generally, the overall guidance that I always would say to people for just general welfare is whole food, home cooked, and lots of different plants, about 80%, and then the 20%, whatever else you want to do. Because we've got to be happy, right? You've got to be enjoyable. We can't be the food police, or we end up either getting divorced.
I was going to say, we could be pretty vanilla lifestyle, couldn't it? If we can't just go off feast every now and again.
Well, my wife, when I got together with my wife, and I was in the sort of extreme phase of my evangelical nutritional therapy 3-year diploma.
It'd be a bloody nightmare.
Well, I was, and she grew up in Italy. She's from Ecuador. She grew up in Italy, and after about 2 months relationship, she turned to me and said, "If I can't eat pasta Parmigiano, it's over."
Without you bending my ear, it's definitely going to stop right here.
So you've got, and she always says to me, and there's a massive amount of truth behind this. You've got to be happy. Don't get militant about it, and try not, because it's about enjoying what you do as well. But generally it's home cooked food, whole food, and as many plants as possible is basically it.
Exactly. So yeah, exactly. As you say, it's fresh produce ultimately, be that vegetables, fruit, and go to your butchers, get your fresh meat and everything. Otherwise, avoid all the packaged, pre-processed crap.
Yeah,
Because
I mean, you like the old me in my 20s and 30s, would be buying the cheap meats all the time, whereas now I don't want to eat meat all the time because certain meats are labelled by the WHO as carcinogenic, and I would avoid them. We can get into that in a minute. But what I do now is I would basically, my aim is to have 80% plants all week, and then I'll have a little bit of meat. But rather than being meat every day, I'll go for the more expensive cut, the organic one, because the money I saved on buying it every day for every night, for example, meat 2 veg. Well, your listeners won't understand that joke. When Charlie came to stay with me at Wildview,
oh God,
he spent 6 weeks work basically.
Where are you going with this?
Well, I'm just saying that you said I'll cook for you tonight, and meat and 2 veg. There's nothing wrong with that, but just I would do 3 veg every day of the week, and then meat 2 times a week.
Well, actually, that was the start of my kind of nutrition diet journey, and that was based on the premise I was spending my time with you. And a bit like your wife, yes, you were bending my ear, but straight away I was thinking, do you know what? I really need to start thinking more seriously about my choices here. And particularly now, in light of, cancer remission, it was something I'd neglected for such a long time. Do you know what I mean? Whether that was eating sugar, eating shit, eating cakes. And I suddenly realised, Carl, you need to be taking some kind of responsibility here, mate. You've been through the ringer. Don't bring it upon yourself again through bad choices, So,
it's great.
It was great. I was grateful to sort of spend that time that I did with you. I think it was in COVID, wasn't it? But So you'd alluded, now that I've just sort of paid mention to cancer, and given that this is a sort of resource primarily for those directly, indirectly affected, you did suggest that there were certain diets, certain food choices that could certainly sort of help in the, let's say, prevention, if you like. It's no guarantee, but certainly we could be having more of, or less of certain foods that could certainly sort of aid in that respect. I know that superfood word is coined around a lot, whether that's just marketing clout at all or not. But me personally, I love broccoli. Now, I think that's, in my interpretation, is a superfood, and I think it does have its benefits.
I agree.
There. But maybe you can pinpoint a couple of products or produce that you think would actually...
It's great that you think broccoli is a superfood. That would be my definition of a superfood. So would chickpeas, but not things like maca and spirulina powder, because whilst those are those sort of supplement type things, if you're on chapter 20 of your wellness journey, crack on with all those kind of final bits of the icing on the cake, the supplements, powders, and all that sort of stuff. But if you haven't got the basics right, then you're just pissing in the wind with that stuff, to be honest with you. So, the whole foods are what we need, and those are the kings of balanced nutrition. So the first thing I would say to anyone is educate yourself for half an hour, learn about macro, micro nutrients. It's only going to take you 30 minutes.
Is it worth just touching on those now quickly?
Yeah, very quickly. You've got macronutrients. You all know what they are. You just need your memory jogged. It's protein, fats, and carbs. Protein, fats, and carbs are all very, very important in individual ways. Some people might say carbs are not important because you don't get any function out of them apart from energy and and you can get energy from other sources like keto and protein. But carbs are important because as long as you're eating complex ones, it gives you the healthy fiber, which is what we need in our guts for our bacteria to feed on. So when you're eating your carbs, which gives us our energy in the form of glucose, make sure they're whole food carbs, ideally. So don't go for the donuts. That's your sort of 20% on the weekends. The pizzas all the time, the refined flours. Go for the complex carbs, which are all of the fruits, the vegetables, the pulses, the grains, all that sort of stuff, because they are slow release. They're what we call polysaccharides. So they are a number of different chains of sugars which take longer to break down in the gut. And it's a slower release of glucose into the bloodstream. So it's better for you from a blood glucose point of view, but also you get the fiber, which doesn't get digested. It's indigestible fiber. Indigestible carbohydrate, which is what this fiber is what the bacteria feed on. So carbs are important, but if you're eating too many refined carbs and not moving enough, you're going to put weight on, and that is a big risk for cancer. So think about that. Then there's the fats, which are critically important. Have sadly been demonized for 40 years by a doctored study by the in the States back in the 60s, which basically sparked this entire low-fat, no-fat industry, which we now know has been what's causing this massive epidemic of obesity and diabetes, because they basically replaced the fat in processed food with sugar. And so never ever go for low fat or no fat. Please bin it. Do not go for low fat yogurts. No, fat is important. Try and get most of your fat from poly and mono unsaturated fats. So those are things like your nuts, like your avocados, your olive oil or olives, your oily fish. But critically important for brain health and heart health and general functions.
So avoid. Sorry to interrupt. The supermarkets. We're so misled to an extent when we see all these packaging going low fat, no percent reduced fat, etc., and everyone goes, "Oh, great! I'm not going to put weight on as a result." I mean, it's quite sort of black and white.
It's a complete marketing. It's a complete load of rubbish. If you think about, it's so depressing, really. But if you think about a marketing budget of the top 5 processed food companies, the Nestle's, the Marses, the Coca-Colas, I mean, it completely dwarfs by about, I don't know, God knows how many millions and billions, the marketing budget of health organizations and the government in trying to campaign against these problems. And so you're fighting a losing battle. So we have to educate ourselves and not rely on what it says on those products, because a lot of the time it's absolute rubbish. You need to learn to read the labels, because those are our regulatory, legally enforced requirements on the back of packets. Okay. So learn how to decipher, the amount of protein, fat, and carbs in a product. But generally, you're choosing products that don't come in a packet at all.
Yeah. So that rewind is what we said previously, right? Just go back to fresh produce. Yeah.
Whole foods that haven't been ultra processed, basically. And then finally, we just didn't mention protein there. So protein is critically important for multiple functions in the body, and so many of us don't have sufficient amount of protein. Now, you can get most of your protein from plant sources: chickpeas, beans, nuts, lentils, rices, peas, and then you might want to top it up with a little bit of meat a couple of times a week. If you're a vegan, you could go without meat the whole time, obviously, but you need to be educated in knowing what the right choices are so that you don't become, a little bit under some of the levels that you need to be in.
Because nuts in particular, George Page mentioned to his wife reading somewhere we need to be taking on board like 30 grams of nuts on a daily basis. I mean, back in the day, I'd be sat in a pub and have a pint of beer and a bag of roasted peanuts or salted peanuts. So in terms of the context, can you just quickly elaborate a little bit more? Because I think I've learned from you, it's a healthy fat, slow releasing energy, right?
It is, but I say to all the clients on the retreat, when I say we need to eat nuts on a daily basis, that's not the roasted paprika flavored Bombay mix stuff. Right. Sorry, mate. Yeah, those are no good. You've got to remember these are essentially living organisms that are dormant at that moment in time. Now, if you roast them in a packet, you're basically killing all the live nutrients that would have been in them. Yes, it'll still perform some sort of function, but it's much better to be raw and to not have been processed in any way. So raw nuts are amazing, and I get them in on a daily basis like medicine, but I don't rely on them just being in jars for me to dip into, because I just wouldn't remember to do it. So it's part of my healthcare strategy that there's 6 Kilner jars lined up staring at me when I wake up in the morning, when I go and make my cup of whatever it may be. And I put my hand in all 5 or 6 of those Kilner jars into a NutriBullet, blend them all up with some frozen berries, so a little bit of broccoli, maybe an apple, and some water or some nut milk, and then get it down me. And that's my medicine for the day, my preventative medicine, not my reactive medicine to deal with an issue. Yeah, and I've been doing the smoothie for 10 years. And look, some people might say, well, the smoothie's not great because you're not chewing, you need to chew. You need to break it down properly and all these things. Absolutely. If you're on chapter 25 of your wellness journey, then stick all those things that I just mentioned in a bowl and eat them slowly over an hour. But when you're busy, when you haven't got the time to make stuff and you just need to get it in, whack it in a smoothie, blend it up and get it down, because it's better
Yeah.
to get it in than not at all.
Yeah.
So yes, I found that being a young man a few years ago, not now, not necessarily now, that when I was working in a typical routine job in London, the best thing for me was to make the smoothie with the things I just mentioned.
Yeah.
Not too many tropical fruits, not too many bananas, mangoes, anything like that. Try and keep it as minimal sweetness as possible, as much as you can tolerate.
Right.
And then get the nuts and the seeds in, because those have such healthy, amazing fats and also good quality protein. And they basically will tick all the boxes for your nutrition requirements on for the day. And they are preventative in terms of heart disease and cancer as well.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, because as you say, so many people have such a busy lifestyle these days, and they're always on the move. They just don't have the time. But inherently, particularly those who might be commuting in London and going back, rewinding when we were both in London ourselves, you grab croissant, you have that bowl of cereal, you have a sandwich, you have a bag of crisps, you have a can of Coke, and it's looking back now, it's just recipe.
So many people go to work. Some people go to work and their breakfast is caffeine, which is basically a performance enhancer, and sugar. Literally at a molecular level, you've had a croissant or a piece of toast with some marmalade on, and a coffee, and you've had basically sugar, which is also something that just like makes you do that blood sugar crash. But there's been no protein or fat, which is what enables the body to function on all these different levels. I could get into the details of what protein does, but I'm not going to now. But if you're not getting protein and fat in, you're going to put weight on, because you're going to be starving later and you're going to have more carbs, and you're also going to slowly it's a slow deterioration in function. So by the time you get to 30, you think, I don't feel like as good as I was when I was 20. By the time you get to 40, it gets worse, and 50 and 60. So it's about educating yourself, about getting the right things in and getting them down, like preventive medicine.
Right, amazing. Okay, so that in a sort of a preventative perspective, let's sort of tick that box. But now, typically, I sort of alluded to a little trailer on this one about during treatment, and retaining sort of strength and trying to keep your strength and immunity up, because I know firsthand during my chemotherapy there was a period where I was put into a isolation unit for about a week because my immunity was so low and they were so afraid of me picking up just random infections, so I was literally locked away. But whilst there was food coming in, if one was choosing the right foods to build said strength and immunity, again, any sort of help and insight there would be great.
Totally. Well, the first thing I'd say for everybody listening is, as I said before, educate yourself on the right foods to be eating and why they're important. So the macronutrients and the micronutrients, so balanced whole food, but also blood test. Now, I'm going to explain why that's relevant to your point in a second, but even if you're perceived to be healthy and fit, you should blood test every 6 months. Now, unfortunately, NHS doesn't have the resources to just do that willy-nilly for you if you don't have a health complaint for them to then action this blood test. So go and get it done privately. For the sake of £100, best investment you'll make every year or every 6 months. And just check to see whether those bio blood markers are in ranges, because I would say 90% of the UK population is vitamin D insufficient, not necessarily deficient, but insufficient. So they're already losing when it comes to immunity. And I was one of those people. The range of the right levels of vitamin D for the NHS are so wide that you could be really, 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 really low, and therefore getting tonsillitis and getting recurring infections and get a risk of osteoporosis and all these things that vitamin D insufficiency relate to. But not ever getting picked up. So you want to be in the optimal level of vitamin D, which involves taking vitamin D supplements quite consistently.
I was going to pay mention to supplements. Like, how much would you recommend the supplements in your daily sort of diet?
It's always about the food first. Get the food right first, and then that's your chapter 1 or chapter 2 of your health journey, and get into a routine of that. So the smoothie in the morning with the right whole foods in, making sure that you're getting the right fats and proteins in during the day, not overeating after 8 o'clock at night. All of these sort of routine, habitual things. Get that right first. Then you can start thinking about the next chapter, which is then optimizing with supplementation. But getting a decent blood test done will get it. For people will be able to see that a lot of these things won't get picked up on by the NHS because, quite rightly, they're only really there to help us when we've fallen over, scraped our knee, and need an emergency intervention.
Yeah.
So they're not there to kind of deal with, leading towards that in the 10 years before that.
Yeah.
But get the vitamin D levels right, because that is critical for immunity. That's the first thing I would say. Okay. And then when it comes to the foods, if you're wanting to prevent cancer or even in your remission, then there's a couple of things really. You want to be reducing your dairy. Now, there's a huge amount of evidence that says there's nothing, there's no credible evidence for dairy being relevant to certain types of cancers, but there's also some decent evidence to say that there is. So you can imagine the different industries fighting over that messaging related to dairy. There's a multi-billion-dollar industry. But basically, there's a lot of studies that have come out to show that large amounts of dairy consumption can relate to liver cancers, breast cancer, and prostate cancer in men. So there was a recent study done in China, which was done over 11 years, over 500,000 people. 500,000 people were in this study over 11 years, and there was statistically significant correlation between high dairy consumption and prostate cancer in men and breast cancer. And liver cancer in women. But please, your listeners must understand everything in moderation, right? So for typically healthy people, having a bit of dairy is fine. But it's just if you are concerned about cancer, let's say you've got these cancers in the family, breast, prostate, then you might be thinking about, well, maybe I will choose an alternative to dairy, or I'll maybe only have dairy once a week rather than a pint of milk every day, or whatever it was.
Yeah, because you mentioned alternatives, sorry to interrupt, just on the milk front. We're now presented with so many different choices, be that soy,
it's terrible,
almond.
isn't it?
I'll have this with my coffee. It's like, Christ, that to me suggests they've been enhanced or, manipulated slightly as a result. What are we looking for in a typical
So it all comes down
dairy
to,
milk
it all
choice?
comes, good. I'm glad you asked. Half the time you can just use water.
Yeah.
Right. Let's just forget here. It's just a liquid to change something. But so for example, a smoothie, I tend to do half plant milk and half water.
Yeah.
I make that's palatable for me. But generally for all these nut milks and alternative plant milks, a lot of them are absolute crap. Unfortunately. And it just comes down to educating yourself to read the label. If it's got all the emulsifiers in and the guar gums and all of the E numbers to preserve it, then it's going to do you more harm than good. You want to go for the slightly more expensive ones, unfortunately, that are literally just water and almonds, for example, or water and whatever it may be. So try to avoid the oats one. The oats is basically, if you go back to learn and educating yourself about macronutrients, oat is a carbohydrate. You could put weight on if you're just eating oats all the time and having oat milk all the time. So I tend to go for a fat-based one, like an almond. Make sure it's unsweetened, but it is a minefield. So it's too deep, too complicated to get into here. But ultimately, you can certainly think about reducing your dairy consumption if you are someone who's thinking about cancer prevention. The other thing that I would consider is red meat, and certainly processed red meat. So unfortunately, the WHO has now come out and said that red meat is a probable carcinogenic group 2A, when processed red meat is statistically definitely a carcinogenic. So all in moderation, a little bit. A little bit of salami on your pizza once a month, no problem, absolutely. But if you're eating processed meats all the time, let's say you've got processed meat in your sandwiches on a daily basis. Let's say you're having bacon every morning, like I used to as a student. That's not a good thing to do, but in moderation, it's absolutely fine. So reducing your processed red meat would certainly be something that I would consider. I have red meat about once a week. I find it's really important for my B12 and my just general well-being. I think it is important to have a little bit of it, but the good quality cut rather than you think about people who have colorectal cancer. It's the people who are just eating massive amounts of red meat all the time, burgers, sausages, etc. So it's that type of thing that we want to be moving away from.
So the strength and immunity is more around the vitamin D levels, or the right, just in terms of that sort of going through treatment.
So the immunity thing. Sorry, yeah. So the immunity thing is get a blood test done. Make sure that all of your biomarkers are not only in range but in the optimal level of the range. Yeah. So learn what that is.
That's a blood test off the shelf, or just for the benefit of the listeners, what are we going at? You don't have to endorse anything. None of us are sponsored.
No, well, I'm not endorsed by anyone. That's the great thing about, I'm not selling anything here.
Right.
I just run a retreat, so I don't have any product to sell. And I specifically say that we're not going to sell anything on the retreat because, we don't want to turn it into that thing. All the advice we give is just from our own experience and from what we've learned. I personally really like Medichecks in the UK. You can go and get your blood drawn in any number of towns and cities around the UK, and then it gets uploaded onto your dashboard, and then you can just check it every 6 months. And I just think it's a fantastic resource. But if it's just a vitamin D test on its own, then you can pick them up in Superdrug or anywhere really. Better You, and there's lots of them. So, but generally, I would not bother with just the vitamin D. I'd do the whole 40 biomarkers. And people might say, I've got a really good GP, they'll do it for me. Well, no, they won't do all of the biomarkers that you need to educate yourself on optimal kind of well-being. Basically, they will only do the biomarkers that they have been told by their governing board that they're allowed to pay for, and it's based on responding to a particular ailment or symptom or that they will then test. So typically you might just get 6 or 7 biomarkers, for example. So the good thing about the private tests is, let's say you don't go out partying 3 times that month, then you can pay for a blood test, which may add 10 years to your life. So I think it's a really amazing thing to do. So when it comes to immunity, just getting the decent quality whole foods in, organic if possible, if you can afford it, home cooking, learning to home cook, 15-minute meals, smoothies in the morning is a great hack, I find. And just educating yourself about it, really, and getting into a valid routine that works.
Yeah. And I think the education piece, sort of going from prevention, treatment, and then sort of remission, recovery, it's the education piece and just being very self-aware, as in learning, like we've just done on this episode now, in terms of just retaining that balanced diet, healthy balanced diet, that's just going to keep shit at bay moving forward, right? So take responsibility if indeed you're, of an illness, if you like. Just think, come on, guys.
I think you have to.
Your body's spoken to you, maybe just act on it.
Well, I think that you can't sweep it under the carpet, and if you do, it's at your peril. And even more so, if you put your healthcare professional on a pedestal and go by every single word that they say verbatim, then you've got to remember our healthcare system is, as amazing as it is incredibly stretched, and they only have a certain amount of time. And I think we're moving into a world where we should devote our wellness 10-15% to the state to help us, and then 75-80% whatever to ourselves, because we are the ones who are going to do the preventative work. And I really, really believe that blood testing and educating yourself on balanced, healthy nutrition, and then going further specifically on what your particular issue. Let's say you've got a prostate issue. Let's say, if you've got a prostate issue, you learn that you want to eat tomatoes, because tomatoes contain the lycopene phytonutrient that reduces the inflammation of the prostate. These are things that you would learn by just delving deeper into it. So it's important to get the basics right, good quality nutrition, blood testing to check you're in the straight and narrow, not relying on the welfare state to do it for you, or waiting till you're ill until something happens, and then focusing specifically on the issue that you want to tackle. So for me, it was dirty genes on my father's side, a lot of cancer in the family, heart disease as well, and also vitamin D deficiency. So I'm focusing on those areas, which is and I feel great. But who knows? I might get knocked down by a bus tomorrow. So none of it's worth it.
Mate, honestly. It's been absolutely amazing. Honestly, I could carry on talking to you for the best part of hours, and I think we always do when we catch up in person. I think you've certainly earned yourself another invite back, hopefully as and when is warranted. So, mate, it's been incredible. Thank you so much for the insight. I know you're about to start your first retreat. I think next weekend, is that right?
That's right, yeah. Wildview Retreat in Portugal. We run 14 of our own health retreats a year. Sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 15, sometimes it's 13, but around about that number. Some of them are juice fasting retreats, which are amazing ways to cleanse the body, like a car MOT once a year. And we also do healthy food retreats, which is balanced nutrition,
amazing,
portion controlled with a bit of fitness, yoga, mindfulness, meditation, guided walks, and they're amazing weeks. They really are amazing weeks. So if anyone's interested, drop us a line.
I've been on one myself, and I can highly recommend. So yeah, do check it out, guys. And yeah, listen, mate, you're just about to say one more thing before I was going to say one.
I was going to say one more thing, because the key things, if you're concerned about cancer, is, as we've talked about the whole food, but reducing alcohol, reducing sugar, and reducing ultra processed food and burnt foods. But that's kind of like a small thing. But mainly the alcohol, the sugar, and the ultra processed food. If you take those out or significantly reduce them and revert just to whole foods, then you are already fighting the winning battle.
Well, that's a great takeaway, my friend. A very good takeaway. So listen, mate, I look forward to seeing you very soon, which I know is inevitable.
Yes.
And thanks again for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Congrats on this podcast. I think it's wonderful. And
thank you, mate. Well, hopefully we'll get a few more listeners now that you've been on it, because that was really informative.
Another 2, maybe.
I'll let you know. All right, buddy.
Good one.
We'll catch up with you soon.
Cheers, Jai. Nice to speak to you. Take care.
Well, there you have it, guys. As the old saying goes, you are what you eat. And there would appear to be an element of truth in this after all. Ultimately, we just need to become more mindful and self-aware when it comes to our food choices, and in particular, with those directly associated with cancer. Let's think twice when you reach for that biscuit, piece of cake, bag of crisps, or in my case, bag of dry roasted peanuts. Don't get me wrong, as Andrew said, we can't afford to be too regimented about it. After all, life is for living, but let's certainly start to be more switched on a day-to-day basis. I think the 80-20 ratio serves as a great starting point, 80% of the good stuff and 20% off-piece now and again, and in moderation, of course. Let's go back to the basics. Natural food produce, fresh, homegrown, and please let's avoid those packaged processed products, in particular those that are trying to sell you that dummy. Well, look, you know the script by now. So all the best and eat well. I'm Charlie, this was Talking to Charlie, and I'm off to the supermarket. Take care and look forward to seeing you all soon.